Indian Army may soon get US military Stryker vehicles to face the threat of a two-front war against China and Pakistan. According to latest reports, Indian Army is set to test the mechanized infantry Stryker vehicles in the icy heights of Ladakh to test its operational capabilities. Essential capabilities will be tested in Ladakh to meet the Indian military requirements. These include troop protection, offensive weaponry, terrain negotiation and mobility. Indian military has 50 armoured mechanized infantry battalions. Out of these, 10 battalions are dedicated to support and reconnaissance roles, while the other 40 are regular mechanized infantry battalions. Indian Army and the Indian Air Force are locked in a border standoff at the LAC against the Chinese military, ever since China violated previous border agreements and attempted to occupy previously held neutral territory. Indian military wants to test the Stryker's capabilities in the thin air of Ladakh to test whether it can meet the operational requirements in arguably the toughest battlefield in the world. According to reports, the US has offered to upgrade the engine in the Stryker to more than double the capacity to meet Indian military's demands. The test would also be conducted in the desert terrain along the western border with Pakistan. According to reports, Indian Army has the need to procure 530 armoured vehicles, also known as infantry combat vehicles. These are essential vehicles needed in any modern military. It enables limited troop transport in armoured vehicles to the front lines amidst enemy fire. Vehicles like the US military Stryker offer protection to the soldiers while also boasting anti-armor weapons like the Javelin, along with mounted machine guns if needed. India and US had agreed last year to pursue the 8-wheeled Stryker as a joint venture under the ISET initiative for critical and emerging technologies. The same had been discussed during the recent visit of US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan to India as he held talks with his Indian counterpart Ajit Doval. The Indian Army wants to use the Stryker vehicles to replace the older Russian-origin BMP-2 vehicles in use with the infantry currently. The older Russian-origin BMP-2 is an amphibious vehicle capable of tackling any terrain. However, the American Stryker is not amphibious, and thus changes may be needed to meet Indian military requirements in Ladakh. According to reports, if India and US decide to go ahead with the Stryker deal, then some would be purchased in ready-to-go mode or off the shelf, while the rest will be manufactured in India under the Make in India initiative with the relevant tech transfer. But what does this mean for the Indigenous Wheeled Armour Platform, or WHAP, or WAP, which is a joint production between Tata and the Defence Research and Development Organization, or the DRDO? Earlier reports claimed that the Indian Army had been impressed by the capabilities of the WHAP even in Ladakh. However, the indigenous vehicles lacked any offensive capabilities like weaponry or fire control systems. However, since the WHAP-2 has undergone modifications to include such offensive capabilities, it remains to be seen whether India will boost its defense partnership with the United States with the Stryker deal or rely on the indigenous WHAP. Maybe both have a future in the Indian military. Meanwhile, across the border, China has a weapon system that looks quite like the American Stryker. The Chinese are well known for reverse engineering Western military advancements to suit the needs of the PLA. The VN-22 is the Chinese equivalent of the US military Stryker vehicles. India has been boosting its firepower along the LAC ever since the 2020 Galwan Valley clashes with the PLA. Since then, the Indian Air Force has procured the Rafale fighter jets from France, while the Indian Army and the Indian Air Force have been armed with the Apache helicopter, also known as tanks in the air. India will soon have an arsenal of 31 armed Predator drones to monitor Chinese troops and tactics 24/7 along the border in occupied Tibet. India is also developing its own light tank Zoravar, specially to meet the requirements of high-altitude warfare where Russian-origin T-90s are difficult to maneuver. 21 rounds of border talks have failed to break the deadlock between the Indian military and Chinese PLA. India's growing military alliance with the United States and Quad has got China worried, as it repeatedly urges India not to get into camps or cliques. But if China was serious about normal resumption of ties with India, then all it has to do is respect the pre-2020 status quo ante at the LAC and never violate Indian territorial sovereignty. The big question remains, can India trust the United States as a reliable defense partner in this Himalayan face-off against the Chinese military? Leave a comment, hit the like button and subscribe to Inconnect News.